Okay, here you go. I'm recording. Right, Zeni, I'm doing my PhD on the roles and functions, the nature of child and youth care work in South Africa, and looking at the extent to which child and youth care workers are adequately prepared for the work, and what kind of further knowledge and skills they might need, and maybe a model towards their training. So I just want to start by asking you what you understand to be the roles and functions of child and youth care workers, and remembering that in this study I'm looking quite specifically, but not exclusively, at the professional level child and youth care workers. So from your point of view, what do child and youth care workers do? What should they do? And how are they doing it?
I think that the present scope of practice, as described in the regulations for child and youth care workers with the professional board, capture adequately the key functions of child and youth care workers. Mm-hmm. I think that engaging in behavior management, helping to respond effectively to children who are around behavior management issues is critical. The scope of practice talks about activity programming, and we have the wonderful example of safe parks as well, where activity programming becomes very significant in the lives of, in the role of child and youth care workers. I think I'm going to have to start again. And
it's fine. Start again. Doesn't matter.
Yeah. Now, because in a way I do think that that's basically the responsibilities. I think the issue of developmental assessment and programming, to actually look at activity, to look at developmental programs that emerge from a developmental assessment, positions the child and youth care workers very effectively, particularly in a multidisciplinary team. Obviously, the other areas are their responsibility to understand how to understand policy and legislation and interpret that into a practical response, and that is your policy analysis, and your other administrative tasks that go with it.
Okay, so just in terms of what you see child and youth care workers as doing, as what are you saying that the roles and functions as they're laid out are adequate, and there's no sort of adjustment needed to that?
I think that the issue of multidisciplinary work, the case management approach, could be included. Mm-hmm. Because I think the child and youth care worker is a key member in the multidisciplinary team, and has a very important contribution to make, particularly in child protection cases, in foster care work, where particularly the social worker, but other social service workers and other role players are significant. Another area that I feel that is omitted is the application of clinical skills, or technical skills might be a better word to use, to the basic child and youth care activities. So how would you apply the scope of practice, or these roles that you play in different settings? And the settings can be different settings in terms of being school-based child and youth care work, or in sexual offences courts, or in communities and families, or in child and youth care centres and residential care. But in addition to that, I'm saying that there are special sort of areas of work, like working with children who are abusing substance, working with children living with disability, working with children who have been affected by substance abuse, the fetal alcohol children. So these unique areas require also a particular application and adaptation of the way they work to respond more effectively to those children with special needs.
You're saying at auxiliary level?
At auxiliary level and at professional level as well.
Okay. When you were talking about the settings, is that an exhaustive list of the settings that you gave?
No, because I think that if you look futuristically, the one model, which is the Bindi Safe Park model, has shown its relevance in South Africa and relevance to children in our country. And I think that the model could become a standalone model where municipalities and even arts and culture can see the value of child and youth care workers being employed in safe parks, in that kind of activity programming, in that setting in communities.
Okay. So you're saying communities, residential, educational, justice.
Yes. And in educational, could I just clarify as well? I'm saying different settings. In the school setting, in primary schools and in high schools. And for example, and setting up safe parks or safe places for children to play in safe spaces within the school setting.
Yeah.
Providing the after-school care component as well. But also in farm hostels, in school hostels, child and youth care workers as teacher aides assisting with behavior management in a classroom setup. So there are various other opportunities within the education setting, including if you had to understand children transitioning into adulthood, into young adults, and accessing tertiary education. They also need that kind of transitional care and that transitional support that an appropriate youth development program would be able to offer. So the youth setting becomes another setting that child and youth care workers have already demonstrated that they can play a role.
Okay. And health?
Yes. So in the health setting, child and youth care workers have already demonstrated their role in supporting families in the HIV/AIDS crisis, but also in broader healthcare issues, working with clinics, working in clinics, working in hospitals, particularly children's hospitals and children's wards, and providing the kind of care and support to support the healthcare services is another area of work that has been explored, but not as well explored in the hospital setting.
Okay. So from your point of view, you're saying that the roles and functions as we have them outlined, and there's obviously that distinction at auxiliary and professional level, those are accurate and reasonable for our current situation, but that the settings demand a slight differentiation in terms of preparation for those settings. I'm just not entirely with you.
Yes. So what I'm saying is that the preparation of child and youth care workers to work in specialized settings and in response to special needs of children requires additional training and additional application of the generic child and youth care approach.
Okay. And do you feel that child and youth care workers, can we just differentiate here between auxiliary level and professional level, at auxiliary level, do you feel that they are adequately prepared and for that, or not, or is there further knowledge and skills that has to be trained? And then I want to just look at the professional level.
I think at auxiliary level there is a definite need for child and youth care workers to receive additional training. And a lot of it might be in certain of the specialized areas, might have to be sort of like technical skills on how to understand, for example, how to identify and refer and respond to substance abuse. The same with disability. So they would need to have that kind of technical knowledge, but they would use a child and youth care approach in responding to children.
Right. Okay. And then in relation to the professional level, which is really where much of my focus is, do you feel that the students who undertake this full time and go through the degree process are adequately prepared for the work? Do you feel that there's or do you feel that there's additional work that needs to be done there?
I think that one could give more attention to the practical experience that they get as students, and also give attention to the work experience that they have, so that the field of child and youth care have more experience in addition to their theoretical knowledge and the degree that they would have. So more attention to be placed on the supervision and the quality of experience, the practical experience that they have. Again, for me, it's an issue about how do they apply their knowledge in ways that are meaningful to children, so that the practice at a professional level can be seen and it's more advanced.
Okay. So anything other than that? Just, are you saying really just from your point of view, it's just a matter of the practical as being something that needs to be, I think you're saying, augmented or managed differently? Can I just clarify that?
I think that actually what I'm saying is the issue of supervision of child and youth care workers needs to be given attention. We need to develop a category and a caliber of supervisors that actually provide professionally qualified child and youth care workers with a level and quality of supervision that actually enhances their practice.
Okay. But you're saying that notwithstanding that, the students need to be exposed to more practical experience. Is that what you're saying? And that their experiences need to be kind of mediated and supervised differently?
Yes. They need to be mentored. They need to be coached. They need to be supervised, so right. that they translate that theory into practice in a way that's really relevant and experienced by children and youth.
And
my personal opinion is that I've seen that happening with the auxiliary child and youth care workers more than I've actually seen with the professional child and youth care workers. And I think the key words I'm using here is translating theory into practice. But you have to translate that theory into practice at a professional level, which means it ought to look different than what the child and youth care workers at auxiliary level
Yes.
are presenting.
Yes.
And they have to be supervised to do that.
Right. Okay. So, as far as you're concerned, the content of what they are absorbing is in order.
I think the basic content of what they're getting in the degree is in order. I don't think that the content is cutting edge new information that is being produced internationally, but also that is what is innovative and relevant to the South African and the African setting is being integrated enough in their training.
Okay. So the material is okay as far as you're concerned, but not in a sense adapted for the context. Am I correct?
Not adapted enough for the growing context. Right. Already, child and youth care workers are exploring their work in different settings. Already, we don't have material that shows how child and youth care workers, for example, work in schools. We don't have enough material training child and youth care workers to work in the sexual offences courts. There are openings for child and youth care workers in different settings, and we could position ourselves better if we were trained better. And of course, if we developed the practical opportunity for child and youth care workers as well to practice in those settings. And in that process, learn how to supervise them more effectively. All of these are parallel processes that go together. So developing the child and youth care field into the settings and into the spaces where they could be effective requires us to give attention to the curriculum, to give attention to the practical placements, to give attention to the supervision of professional childcare workers, and not to forget that child and youth care workers, when they move into some of the work that will require them to participate with other social service professionals, they're needing to work more adequately in multidisciplinary teams. They need to understand what their role in an integrated case management approach is.
And you feel that's perhaps lacking?
Yes, that is actually lacking. That is lacking. And the other area the child and youth care workers need to sharpen their skills is in the issue of filling in forms, recording, logging, ensuring that their practice is translated in writing in a way that is useful to others in a multidisciplinary team. So that's an important part of their training and development as well. Because what I'm actually saying here is that and I hadn't mentioned in the scope of practice, I think one of the key roles is providing developmental care. But how does that developmental care translate into the professional practice at all these different levels, in all these different settings, and in the specialized needs of children is what we should be able to articulate better. I'm just trying to think of a better way of saying that, because developmental care needs to be adequately expressed in professional child and youth care practice, and particularly in integrated case management, because that is a unique characteristic and quality and role that we play for children in those circumstances.
And am I hearing you correctly when you say that they struggle, you feel that they struggle to log and to express and to write reports and do the administration that requires them relaying what it is that they've done? And am I correct in saying that that's what, paraphrasing you there, thus?
You're correct, but in two ways. I don't think child and youth care workers articulate well enough their practice, and they also find it difficult to write it down, to articulate it in writing, in written word. So maybe if we focused on getting them to talk more about their practice, to talk more about what they do, to use child and youth care words and language more in the way they express themselves, maybe they would be able to write it better. And so whether the training of the professional child and youth care workers give enough attention for talking practice is something I wonder.
That's interesting. Yeah. And so you're saying that at the administration issue you're saying is an issue at both auxiliary and professional levels. Am I correct?
Yes, and I think that filling in forms and capturing information is one aspect of child and youth care administration, ensuring we are accountable and that we can demonstrate the work that we do. But I think at another level, articulating our practice with the appropriate child and youth care language and words, and how we do that in either logging processes or in developmental assessments and developmental plans or in any sort of like report that we write, needs to be strengthened. And again, I feel that we're needing supervisors who can ensure that the spirit of the child and youth care practice is articulated as well as being well written.
Okay. Do you have to get up and do something? I heard a beep. Okay. Okay. Can we just go on then, just to talking about the nature of the work, and as you say, the spirit, and capturing the spirit of the work. I mean, can any of us capture the spirit of the work? Can we say what is child and youth care work? You referred earlier on to the scope of practice, and you said you felt that captures the scope of practice. Does it capture the spirit?
I think the spirit is captured within the scope of practice. And so the words that childcare workers quite often use when they describe their work is passion. It's care. It's sometimes love. Child and youth care work talk about being positive. Children experience them as positive. Child and youth care workers are energetic. Child and youth care workers are strengths-based. Child and youth care workers are non-judgmental. Child and youth care workers are warm and accepting. They're comforting to children. All those words are elements that describe the spirit that comes into the child and youth care practice. So developmental care is not to be provided to children. It's to be experienced by children. And children often say that this is what we've experienced from our childcare worker, but they might just say that they've actually experienced love, or they've experienced Auntie being positive. She always has a smile on her face.
Mm. 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 Okay.
Children have also said that it's not what she says, but what she does. And quite often, coming home to a home, even in a residential care setting, a cottage smelling of freshly baked scones, shows you that child and youth care workers care for you. They've created a warm, welcoming, nurturing environment for you to come to. Child and youth care, children have said that they've actually experienced child and youth care workers noticing what their special needs are, and on their birthdays, baking the cake that they particularly liked, or cooking the meal that was their favorite. All of those things demonstrating, I care for you, I love you, I notice you, you are important to me, you are special, you are an individual, you're different to the others. And in the context of working with groups of children, to be able to provide that individual attention, care to each child in that context, is demonstrating good child care practice. And that is what we have seen in South Africa.
Mm. 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 Okay. And just you mentioning South Africa particularly, do you see a difference between South Africa and other contexts, and is there something in a South African version of child and youth care work that you see emerging or not?
I think the sensitivity to culture, the sensitivity to context, the understanding of where children come from, recognizing that at a deep level comes from the child and youth care workers' own personal experiences. And I've often felt that there is a sort of parallel process in understanding the children. They understand themselves. In understanding themselves, they understand the children better. And the quality of child and youth care that they provide is enhanced by their own self-awareness, which takes me back to the training as well. I'm not too sure if in our training we are promoting enough reflective practice. We might be doing it, but we need to do that much more, and much more even in supervision.
Mm. Mm.
People need more opportunity and time to reflect on their practice, to talk about it, and to understand why they did what they did, and what did it mean to them, as much as what did it mean to the child.
Mm. And can I just ask about managing, very, very difficult situations, and the child and youth care workers' capacity to do that in South Africa, and given the context that we are faced with, whether people are able to do that, or whether they need additional skills to enable them to work in the kind of context that they are deployed.
I can speak more confidently about community child and youth care,
Mm-hmm.
and say they have demonstrated amazing capacity
Mm-hmm.
to actually navigate very difficult situations in the best interests of the child.
Yeah, and these are both auxiliary level and professional level child and youth care workers.
Yes, degree child and youth care workers.
Oh.
They are able to find solutions in the most difficult of circumstances. One of the things that I've noticed is that they are able to build relationships with very difficult stakeholders and use those relationships to assist the child. I've found that they're very intentional in their practice, very intentional in the way they work. They are, are, are able to demonstrate tenacity, resilience in the context of many inefficiencies, rejections, lack of competencies, and lack of support from sometimes other social service professions that they need to work with, particularly in child protection matters and other clinical needs that children have. Yeah. Their cultural competence also shows up where they use their cultural knowledge in ways that are in the best interest of the child, both in families and in communities.
Yeah, and yeah, okay, and they're able to sustain working in the context of what are often horrifying situations.
Well, I've seen the African spirit of Ubuntu expressed by child and youth care workers in very practical ways. They do walk an extra mile. They do care for the child on the street who's not in school. They would stop and give attention, even if it were in the evening on a Saturday, at any time, at night. So what you find here is a compassionate heart, a willingness to walk the extra mile, a capacity to provide very concrete, practical support to children and families at any time. And that amazing quality is noticed by the communities. And in many ways, by them being community members, for example, they are strengthening the fabric of that community by just being there. And others notice it, and they're inspiring to other community members who also want to do the same.
Okay. So just going back to that issue of the nature of South African child and youth care work. I actually forget now what you had articulated as one of the elements of it. But is there anything else that you would want to add to that?
You see, I think if you're looking at international child and youth care practice, which I think is captured adequately in the scope of practice of child and youth care workers, what we've done is we've infused that with very much our African approach, with our practice wisdom, with our own professional judgment about how to respond in different circumstances, much coming from our own cultural wisdom and cultural understanding, our Africanness, but also with focus on context, looking at the reality of the context. Child and youth care workers seem to have a great capacity to read the situation around them, to understand what's happening, that in the context of poverty, in the context of loan sharks, in the context of drug lords, in the context of children dropping out of school, teenage pregnancy. So in those contexts, how to again navigate their way in supporting children and at the same time providing the relevant advocacy. So that brings me to the next point that I didn't actually share, which is that I believe there's a very strong child rights culture that is expressed by child and youth care workers in South Africa. And that framework gives them the stability and the and the confidence to also challenge cultural practices that violate children's rights. And with that knowledge, they can navigate again their journey into responding to children's needs. There's another point that I forgot, but one of them was certainly the issue of child rights. The other point was advocacy. They are a very clear and powerful advocates for children. So they would go to magistrates. They would toy and create an activist response around a perpetrator who might be being let out on bail for who had abused a child. So they would make their voices heard, and in that way, very, very strong. I think that generally, we know in South Africa, we have a very strong female child and youth care work child and youth care worker population. I'm correct. I'm not too sure if I'm accurate, but we are certainly majority women. And there's something about a strong African woman standing up for children's rights that can be quite daunting and extremely powerful when they organize themselves to do that.
Okay, so you're saying advocacy and you said advocacy and child rights form some elements of a South African expression of child and youth care work.
Yes, and I think the cultural competence, which I have not seen as clearly in other countries.
Yeah.
And reading context more accurately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds like what you're saying, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but when you were talking about like the context that you said earlier on drug lords, dropping out of school, teenage pregnancy, that kind of thing, it sounds like also that you're talking about child and youth care workers who are sort of undaunted by what seem to be daunting contexts or daunting environmental contexts.
Yes, I think they're quite bold and quite clear about what they see and work a plan about how to navigate their way through it. A lot of the experiences that the children go through in communities are experiences that they have had themselves. So they understand the context well enough to understand the loopholes that they could use, or how to navigate through them if they can't be resolved. There is I used the word before, there is a tenacity, there is a resilience, there is something about strength in their work that allows them to hang on and leave sometimes no stone unturned in the best interest of the child. And a lot of this is done with, I think, an element of giving, of generosity, of self-sacrifice, of flexibility. Those are the qualities they would display in responding as fully as they do to the needs of children and families. And I think in residential care too, in the same way, and the attention to detail. Child and youth care understand what Henry Meyer talks about is a minutia of detail. Yeah, that little things matter. Putting a child's hair in a ponytail when they're going to see the magistrate on a rape case is what a child care worker would do. Making sure that she presents herself well so that she can be heard for what she needs to say. Yeah, that's just one example.
And without being leading in any way, the role of the child and youth care worker and in a sense in networking and being a kind of a core of bringing people together or services together. Do you feel that is an element that is important?
Well, child and youth care workers create access to resources and support to children, and they do it through their relationship with stakeholders, and they do it through ensuring that stakeholders are accountable for delivery of services that they're supposed to provide. Within the Izibindi model and in community child and youth care work, they would ensure that stakeholders provide services for children, and their networking capacities are amazing. There are stories of child and youth care workers feeling that social workers wouldn't allow the parents to come in to the offices with them, saying the parents must come on their own, and the parents would have wanted the child care workers to come in. So they would walk with them, take them right to the social worker's office, and actually hide behind the office, let them go in, and be there for them when they come back, providing that kind of support. What they're doing there is ensuring that as much as possible they're making the families access services, that are difficult to.
Sorry?
No, go ahead.
No. In residential care, there's often a much kind of longer time exposure of the child and youth care worker to children, and in some of the other settings that's not necessarily the case. Do you see any kind of alteration in how we need to think of child and youth care work being taking place in those different, in a sense, sort of rapid engagement contexts?
I think that child and youth care work needs to be seen as child and youth care work practice on the move. We should be moving to be more responsive to children in their contexts, in all the different settings. And we're needing to demonstrate innovation and creativity in the way we respond. So going back to your point about responding more speedily to children is becoming more essential in cases of emergency, in cases of risk, HIV positive children, identifying them and responding to them, equally so with substance abusing youth, and to actually sharpen our observation skills, sharpen our responsive capacities, sharpen our capacity to build relationships, even rapport with children, so that we can access information from them that helps us respond more effectively to them. in, for example, another setting like a school setting, one needs to understand the context of a school setting, and each school is different to another. But to understand that and connect the dots, we talk about meaning making in child and youth care, that late coming will lead to absenteeism, and absenteeism will lead to dropout. And how can we prevent children from coming late to school, or responding at a preventative level there, so that we actually prevent the absenteeism that leads to dropout? The childcare workers have discovered that themselves, that would be the appropriate way to respond, and in their practice have implemented again that developmental care, that behavior management, that developmental assessment, all together in the way they're responding in a very unique way in a school setting. And if, for example, in a school setting, they're called in to a class to supervise a class of 40 children, child and youth care workers have realized they better learn the skills to do that. Managing 40 children, even if it's for 45 minutes, is a big task to do. And not all childcare workers are well prepared for that. But they're adapting to that expectation in a school setting and building up their capacity to do it. Now, what I feel is that this kind of practical building of their capacity to respond in different settings has to become the theory that is taught at universities and in training programs. We need to build from the practice the experiences that need to be captured in more effective academic teaching. Because child and youth care workers, for example, could come out of universities with the capacity to work with large groups in a classroom setting. They could come out of university knowing how late coming and absenteeism and dropout connect, and could have even more interesting ideas as to how to respond to that.
Right. But they're not, because that knowledge has not actually been lifted from informal to formal level.
I think so, and I think that there's enough evidence and research out there, particularly around community child and youth care work, that the universities should give attention to extracting the richness of.
Okay. Do you need to go?
I think now it is.
Okay. I think that has been very helpful. Thank you very much, Zeni.
Thank you.
Okay.
Tell me now, will you switch it off?
Yeah. Okay, Donald. Well, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, ma'am.
I really appreciate. I think.